Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel, we're going to talk about album purchases influenced by record store clerks. So this doesn't happen a whole lot, but when it does, it's an amazing feeling to walk into a record store, they're playing something over the sound system, and you're like, whoa, what is that? I got to get that. So I'm going to talk about a few instances where that happened to me in the past. Just recently, well, not recently, really, maybe in the past 5 years or so, before Amoeba Records in Hollywood switched to their new location. Their initial location, I think it was off of Cahuenga, I believe, and Hollywood Boulevard, somewhere around that area, but they had a huge store, and it was like a Disneyland for nerds, basically, music nerds. Huge sections for different genres of music. In the back of the store, they had a whole section, like a whole different room for like jazz and classical music. So you'd come out of the kind of the rock section and you'd move into this other area where they'd be playing jazz or classical. And so one day I was in there in the jazz section of Amoeba Music, probably a good 8 years ago, maybe. And I heard this album playing over the speakers, and I was like, it just immediately caught my ear. And it was an album by jazz guitarist Grant Green, and the album is called Idle Moments. And it was like almost immediately I was into this. It's just so, the tracks, the arrangements on this album are so infectious. The title track, Idle Moments, it's about a 14-minute track, but it just kind of takes you somewhere really nice. Other tracks on here that just blew me away was the second track, Jean de Fleur, which is this really upbeat, really catchy, infectious track. And there's an alternative track too at the end of the bonus section of this CD too, of this particular track, which is equally as good. Other tracks on here like Django are amazing. There's literally like 4 tracks on this complete album. I believe it was like 2 songs per side on the original album. And it ends with a track called Nomad, which is fantastic. So I just fell in love with this album, and I had to discover more Grant Green. So over the past, few years or so, I've picked up other albums of his on the Blue Note label. This one called I Want to Hold Your Hand, named after the Beatles song. It doesn't sound anything like the Beatles track. You wouldn't even know it was an actual cover. It sounds so different. And also on here he does Corcovado by Antonio Carlos Jobim. It's just a really uplifting record. Love his guitar playing, just that clean sound. Everything's very tasteful. The band behind him on all these albums are fantastic. On this one, he has Elvin Jones on drums, who played for Coltrane. You got Larry Young on organ, Grant Green on guitar, of course, and we've got Hank Mobley on tenor saxophone. Another great album here by Grant Green. And then I picked up another one called Matador, which is really, really cool as well. And then I picked up a vinyl of his. Look at this photo. This is just classic. This is called Green Street by Grant Green. Look at that photo of Grant Green. Fantastic. So that's one instance there of something I heard in a record store that I had to pick up on the spot. And then now I've become a huge Grant Green fan. Another one a few years ago, I believe I might have been at Freak Beat Records on Ventura Boulevard. And I've never had any Joe Strummer solo records. I'm a huge Clash fan. And be honest with you, I never even really listened to any of Joe Strummer's solo records. But they were playing this compilation album called Assembly, which I really, really dug. I didn't pick it up on the spot. I eventually picked it up on Amoeba. But it's just a great compilation of these just really wide-ranging Joe Strummer songs. You got like Coma Girl on here and Johnny Appleseed. He does a solo version with his band of I Fought the Law, which the Clash covered. Even a live version of Rudy Can't Fail, which is really cool. And then he does a version of Marley's Redemption song, which is really, really cool as well. So yeah, really dig this compilation. It was released on the Dark Horse imprint from George Harrison. So highly recommended, called Assembly. The other one I heard over the loud system of the record store. I believe it was Freak Beat. And yeah, had to get it, bought it, love it. Back in the mid-90s, around 1994, at least in LA, there was this, the first time I ever heard an alternative adult album radio station. And it only lasted for about 3 years. It was on from about 94 to 97. The radio station was called KSCE, KSCA. And the call letters were 101.9. And they were like, at that point, they were like highlighting a lot of new up and coming alternative acts, like, you know, the Wallflowers, and there was Sean Colvin and Jewel and Sheryl Crow and Dave Matthews. And then they'd also play a lot of like classic alternative adult rock along with it. Really cool station. But I kept hearing this song by this guy, Freddie Johnston. And they kept playing this song called Bad Reputation. Thought it was a really great track. And I ended up being in a record store around the same time. And they were playing this whole album in its entirety over the speaker system. And I was just like, I got to get this. And it is fantastic. I forgot how great this record was. I put it on the other day. This guy's still making records today. He has like a good 15 records in his discography. I don't know if he's still playing out, but he's still making music. And I never really explored anything beyond this, but I should. I should explore more of the Freddie Johnston catalog, because this is a fantastic record. And just being in the record store, hearing the whole thing in its entirety really influenced me to buy the whole album, and I'm glad I did. And again, I need to delve more into his catalog. So Freddie Johnston, if you've never heard him, check this album out. This Perfect World was released in 1994. Back in the early 80s, I'd say more like 83 throughout the 80s into the early 90s, Rhino Records record store, which was initially in Westwood, I think it was on Westwood Boulevard, in fact, they would have these annual parking lot album record store day sales. And they'd have these huge tables out in the back, outside, with, you know, hundreds of boxes of albums that they were selling for 23 cents. I mean, it was really like a cheap thrills delight on a Sunday afternoon, right? So many people there. My brother-in-law and I would go, and we'd just fight our way through and just flip through all these albums. You know, it was like 23 cents. So who cared? You know, you would just take a chance and everything. But I always remember during these sales, they'd always play interesting music over the intercom, right? While we were searching through the records, sometimes they would play like these really cool reggae albums, and then other like odds and ends that I never really heard before, other odd like genres and stuff. But I remember one particular day we were in this parking lot sale, and they were starting to play this lounge music, and I just really fell for it. I just love this stuff. It has such a vibe. And I later found out that these compilations they were playing were these Ultra Lounge compilations put out by Capitol Records. So they were called Ultra Lounge, and they all had their own kind of like subject matter. Like here's one, Wild and Swingin'. Love this stuff. And then another one called Bossa Novaville. And I remember that one day, like the whole entire day, we were searching for albums in this parking lot, these 23-cent albums. They were playing this stuff, and it was just so infectious that I had to go out eventually and search this stuff out, because I just love this. It's not something I just put on randomly, but I have to be in a certain mood. But I mean, it's just great. Chill out music, such vibe, and the instrumentation is so great. So very influential to me, just from just hearing it over an intercom in a parking lot at a Rhino Records sale. I had to get these CDs. Now, there's tons of these volumes. I'm still searching for the rest of them, but I have 3 of them right now. And they're called Ultra Lounge, and they're put out by Capitol. And I think there's probably a good 15 or more compilations of these with various genres included in the Ultra Lounge thing. So good stuff here. So let's go back to the 80s. Back in the 80s, I pretty much lived at the record store. We had record stores that seemed like every 2 miles. Most of the record stores I would go to were on Topanga Canyon in Woodland Hills. There was a Moby Disc, which was an independent record store, and there was another one in Sherman Oaks. And there was a Licorice Pizza just doors down from that. So there was a lot of different places to consume music, buy music. But I'd always spend, you know, back in high school, there wasn't a lot to do on a Friday night unless you wanted to go to the football game. I would spend my entire night at Moby Disc flipping through used albums. In the used section back then, they would have a lot of promo copies of albums that were just released. So that was really cool. You get these promo copies for less than buying, you know, less than a new copy. So, you know, I was just always like looking through the albums, listening to what they were playing overhead. And one day I was listening to this album, and I was like, oh, it sounds like Bowie. At that point, I only had like maybe 1 or 2 Bowie albums in my collection. I think I had the Changes one Bowie album and maybe Ziggy Stardust. But then I heard this album playing over the intercom at Moby Disc, and I think it was around 1981 or so. And I think the first song I remember hearing was the song Sound and Vision. I remember thinking how different that was. And then the songs that follow, like Always Crashing in the Same Car, Be My Wife, and everything. And then there was like a little bit of silence, and I just kept looking through records, and then started hearing something completely different. Had no idea it was the same album playing. I thought they just switched to a new album, and they were starting to play side 2 of this album, which is all instrumentals. So I had no idea it was Bowie. So I'm like just kind of in my own little world, searching through used albums. I'm going, God, this is really cool. What is this? And I looked up, and the album's still in the slot saying now playing, and I couldn't believe it. It was the same album, and I was like, I got to get this album. I liked even the instrumental section side better than the first side. And it just kind of took me somewhere. It was really cool ambient music, especially tracks like Art Decade and Weeping Wall. Just wow. So yeah, very influential. Whoever was playing this, thank you so much from all those years ago. This made me get more deep into the Bowie catalog. And from there on in, I was buying, like, periodically I'd buy like Heroes, and then I'd buy Lodger, and then, so just kind of buying out the complete 70s Bowie's catalog over a period of time. So yeah, another example of someone playing this on an intercom at a record store, or a sound system, should I say, and having a big influence on me. So thank you, whoever that was. Another 80s experience was, I think, around late 1980, fall 1980. I was, again, at Moby Disc, my favorite record store at the time. And they were playing this album that was very punkish. It sounded kind of Ramones-ish. But the backup vocals, or the vocals, the harmonies sounded like, to me, just sounded like Jefferson Airplane. And right then, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I know I've mentioned this in probably a previous video, but I remember just right off, as soon as I heard like the first track, going up to the clerk and going, who is this? He goes, it's X. Yeah, they just put up this album in Los Angeles this year. And I was like, immediately had to get it. I remember it just sucked me right in. John Doe and Xing, those vocals, it was amazing. So I literally just about purchased this right on the spot as I heard it. Fantastic. Another similar instance was around 83. I had this part-time job, and I was going to college. And again, I found myself at Moby Disc, and I was starting to read more kind of indie kind of journalism, indie rock journalism. And I think it might have been in Trouser Press. I don't know what magazine, but I was hearing more about this band called REM. So they weren't playing this over the intercom or over the sound system, but I remember just going right up to the clerk and saying, how great is this album? I keep hearing a lot about it. And he goes, it really reminds me of the Byrds. That's why I like it. And as soon as he said that, I was like, I'm in, brought it home. First listen, loved it, became a huge fan. So REM Murmur was another one I heard, I heard about, but it was the record store clerk really telling me what it was all about, how good it was, and it had this jangle sound, so I bought it right on the spot. Another one too, never really heard of Prince, his first few albums, and I never even heard of Dirty Mind, but one day again, I was at Moby Disc Records in around 81, and they were playing this album over the sound system, and I remember they were playing this, the title track, Controversy, and just there was something about it, the lyrics, and just it didn't really sound like anybody else. And I remember too, eventually having to write this down on a piece of paper of albums to buy. I remember back in the day, I would have a list in my wallet. Anytime I heard anything that I wanted or it sounded kind of cool, I'd write it down. So when I had the money to buy it, I would go get it. And this is when I eventually picked up in a used section. Because just from the song Controversy, a lot of people don't really talk about this album. I think it's a really fine Prince album. It's right before 1999 came out, before he exploded. And I think there's some really good material on here. So yeah, this is another instance of hearing something at the record store and my ears perking up and going, yeah, I got to get that. And then another one too is there was just, the Paisley Underground in LA, the early 80s. I think the only album I had in that entire genre was the first Dream Syndicate album, Days of Wine and Roses. But another day I walked into Moby Disc and they were playing this EP, And again, I heard the song called I Go Wild. It was the second track, and I was just immediately sucked into it. Loved this song. Very, very derivative sounding, but I don't care. It's just great, catchy power pop. 3 o'clock, we're part of that whole Paisley Underground thing, along with Dream Syndicate, Rain Parade, Green on Red. And it was a cool scene. It lasted maybe a handful of years, but again, I heard I Go Wild by 3 o'clock, and I had to buy this EP. So, do you have any similar experiences with record store clerks, or just walking into a record store, asking somebody about a record, and then bringing it home and being just absolutely blown away by the music, or just being blown away by the music that you were hearing in the record store and you had to buy it on the spot? Let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear your stories. As always, thanks for watching. If you dig the content, press subscribe. It's for free. No problem. So we'll see you soon, folks. Thanks for watching again. I really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.